Good morning, good afternoon, good day to everyone. My name is Mark Bazinski. I'm going to be your host for this discussion today. I'm CEO of a boutique advisory firm I suspect many of you are familiar with, called Clean Data. We have two guests, if you will, panel members that are going to essentially kick into this discussion and debate about the world of data catalogs. We've got Neil Barton, a senior advisor and fractional CTO, a colleague of mine, been in the industry for many years, who will undoubtedly talk from the perspective of you, the customer out there, you, the potential user of technologies in this data catalog world. And you can see Neil there with taking a break from his morning happy hour to join us on the discussion. We've also got Patrick McGarry. Patrick's a vice president from one of the leading edge and prominent suppliers, providers of data catalog technology. And from his perspective, certainly we'll be able to talk about the evolution of the technology, how he sees it today, and potentially some remarks about where it's all going into the future. So with that, let me kick this off with just data catalog 101. Imagine, guys, we're in a world, it's the Stone Age. Data.world doesn't exist, Alation and Calibra don't exist, Informatica and IBM don't exist. We're just in the Stone Age, and there's no such thing as data catalogs. What does that world look like? And how do we even know there's such a thing as I need a data catalog? Neil, maybe start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. I think you kind of evolve into it, right? I mean, most companies who don't use the data catalog, what we're seeing is they will manually maintain information about data sets and entities and objects. So they'll be maintaining it in Word documents or spreadsheets or Google Sheet, or maybe up on a wiki or somewhere on the web, using a tool like Confluence. So they're manually maintaining information about whatever they produce, right? Whether they're a data scientist producing data sets, or someone producing BI reports, or a data engineer doing ETL. They'll be maintaining those in siloed sets of documents that they're having to manually maintain. Okay,
so your point of view is we kind of look after our information, our data, the best we can, but there's no real organized aggregate way of doing it. It kind of happens. I think the word you use is silos, right? Is that?
Yeah, silos. And what we see for those that don't do it is, if it does happen, it's going to be out of date, inaccurate, and sparse. But in a lot of cases, they just don't do it, right? It's tribal knowledge that lives in Neil's head, and if you want to know something, you've got to come to Neil.
Yeah. So Patrick, you agree? And if so, what's the consequence of that kind of behavior or that kind of situation?
Yeah, well, I love the way that Neil put it with that we kind of evolve into it. And I don't think it's even evolve into an endpoint. I think it's a constant evolution, right? And I think, metadata as a concept, maybe not necessarily as a labeled concept, but as a concept has been around forever, right? We all, people of a certain age will know, Rolodexes and card catalogs, and, we look for ways, we look for ways to organize the metadata around our data. And I think as the tools became more sophisticated, whether it was evolving into wikis or Confluence or whatever it is that you have, and now into data catalogs, you're starting to blur the line even further of what you can do with that metadata and then even into the data, right? So I think it's finding what you have. Like when you don't have a data catalog, it's harder to find what you have. Like the tool was purpose built to help you inventory what you have. And then beyond that, you can start aggregating data, and like you can start kind of putting together the people, process, and technology, just like we saw with code tools for code development, right? I think those are the kinds of things that you're going to miss without a data catalog.
Okay, but is this like I'm still sort of struggling with the why I need this sort of statement, right? So if on the one hand, I'm a little older than you. I'm a child in the high school in the 70s. We coped just fine without mobile phones, right? I know anybody under the age of 30 would find that ludicrous, like, oh my gosh, how do you function without a cell phone? But believe it or not, we did, right? There was a concept that you just sort of carry on. There's pay phones, there's all kinds of ways, there's all kinds of tricks to to talk to one another. So I never knew that I needed a mobile phone, whereas today people think like, oh, how do I possibly live without it, right? So if you take that paradigm and you say, well, compare and contrast that to a different sort of style of need, and I had this experience actually on vacation a couple of weeks ago. I'm driving down the road minding my own business, and the tire blows out. And so, all right, I got a need, right? This is not like a casual thing. I need a jack, I need a spare tire, and if I don't have those things, I'm up a creek. So, how do we think about data catalogs? Is it you're up a creek without one? Is this a spare tire and a jack sort of paradigm? Or is this more, yeah, you can kind of function with pay phones. I guess that works okay. But now that we got mobile phones and smartphones, this is a hell of a lot better, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say the thing that I'm going to jump in there is on the mobile phone paradigm. I think maybe phone versus no phone is a little bit of a stark. I think we're more in the do you have a flip phone versus do you have a smartphone, right? I think that's the thing is, and I think that's where we are right now. The data ecosystem has just gone through a period of rapid expansion in terms of overlapping tools and things that people have cobbled together to meet their needs. But that said, the edges of those solutions are often rough and unfinished, right? And I think the more that you can do to organize things, make it easier to discover what you even have, where it's going, where it's coming from, who's using it, and then easily flow into the analysis part. I think that's going to be the difference of having, the old style brick Motorola in your hand and the sum total of human knowledge searchable by something like Google with a knowledge graph.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yeah,
I'll buy that. I mean, there's a coping mechanism, right? So Neil, if I got a flip phone in the metaphor, or literally I don't have data catalogs, how do I cope? I mean, how do I as an organization, how do I as a chief data officer, how do we cope without these things?
I think it's probably go back to Patrick's comments, right? I think if we roll back analytics to 20 years ago, it was typically going to be a monolith, right? A big Teradata box or a big Exadata box, one machine, I've got one set of tooling to do ETL. So I've got a centralized environment. And what we've seen, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, right, is a highly distributed analytic infrastructure. So I've got a lot of technology, a lot of databases in play. So how do I have metadata that captures all the information across all of those ecosystems? My Tableau reports, I've got data in BigQuery, maybe I've got an environment over in Azure or in Amazon. My ecosystem has gone from being just a single Teradata environment or Exadata environment to something that's highly distributed in a lot of cases. Right. How do I capture that information and get my lineage and manage my environment that way?
I'll buy that.
Conversely, my organization has become more distributed and federated as well. So I've got a lot of people scattered throughout the organization doing analytics. How do they collaborate in an effective way without having to know to ring Patrick or to ring Mark?
All right. So is there a tipping point? Is this obvious? Like I'm sitting here minding my own business and all of a sudden it's like really obvious I need a data catalog. It sounds like you're suggesting this sort of evolution that all organizations go through from the simple to the complex. But I think you're also arguing that there's a centralized notion where we're all getting along. We all hang out at the same water cooler. It's easy to pick each other's brains, to this place where we're distributed, right? We've got a global footprint. We've got lots of divisions. We've done M&As, mergers and acquisitions. And so all of a sudden, all this new data is showing up, and to just go run into somebody at the water cooler, not so easy, right? Is that a fair characterization in terms of the, this sort of tipping point? How do I know I need one question?
Yeah, I think it's a fair characterization. As my team grows beyond a tight-knit group, that's one aspect. And also as I start to bring in more than just doing a data warehouse and descriptive analytics, I want to do some data science or self-service. So I'm introducing more people into my environment. That'll be another tipping point where a metadata catalog is really going to help me be more productive in my analytics.
Right. And Patrick, if I don't have one, when I pass that tipping point, I'm up a creek. I mean, how would you describe I'm up a creek if I don't have it?
I don't know that it's necessarily up a creek, but I think there are some really clear indicators as to when you need one, right? And one of my favorite books in recent history is called Winning with Data by Thomas Tungus and Frank Bien. And they describe some of the challenges in the data ecosystem. And one of my favorites is data brawls, right? The idea of data brawl. This is where and we've all experienced it, right? Where we come into maybe a quarterly sales review, right? And I have a deck and I say, here are quarterly sales numbers, or here's where the number of leads have come in, and somebody else has a similar deck and it's a different number. Now suddenly we're arguing about, well, where did you get your data? Whose data is right? Whose data is bad, right? And I think, those sorts of things, when you look at those post analysis, those are the sorts of things that your data catalog can help you to generate the common lexicon, to make sure that you're pipelining your data, getting it from the same place, using the same terms. And then if you look at it pre-analysis, when you start asking questions like, hey, where's our data on? Or who can find data on, or what are the systems that we have that cover, like, these are the sorts of questions before analysis where you need a data catalog. It tells you where you are, tells you what you have, and it's going to help you with the people. Who owns it? Who's generating it? So those are the sorts of indicators I think that make it a little bit more clear.
Well, I think you're soft pedaling the need, right? When you say, well, I'm not sure you're up a creek. Look, if I'm a CFO, CEO, any kind of exec, and I find my middle management arguing in a meeting about whose data is right, and I've been in those meetings, that's not a pleasant place to be, particularly when it's it's sort of mission critical in the sense of the decisions we're trying to make based on that data. So to be able to go back, putting words in your mouth now, I mean, to go back and say, where does this data come from? And we have a systemic way of defining it, of being able to chase it up. There's a bit of an audit trail, I can say it that way, maybe, of going back to see what came from where. I, as an executive, go, okay, everybody's, children, stop arguing. Let's figure out what exactly is going on here. So let me take the discussion a little bit of a different direction, right? And that is, there's a historical context that I find interesting, and hopefully those on the call here will as well. Who woke up one day and said, you know what we need is a data catalog that'll fix this problem? I mean, was this like a IBM thing back in the 70s, or what? When did this start?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I sort of split modern data catalogs into sort of three eras. But as I said before, the idea of sort of cataloging in general, cataloging your data, capturing your metadata, it's been around for a long, long time. As long as we've had groups of things, we've had lists of those groups of things, right? But the kind of the phases that I think about, like IBM and Informatica, really kind of came first. And this is where we're coming out of the database age, and we have multiple databases now, and we need to know what data lives where. And this was sort of the folks that had that original breadth to start putting tendrils into the disparate data sources. And this kind of set the stage for phase two, right? This is where a couple of different players came into it from very different places. One, looking at it from a very governance-centric point of view. Like, now we need to control. We know where the data is, kind of, mostly.
So you're talking about another vendor? You've moved past Informatica and IBM now? Somebody else?
Right. IBM Informatica was phase one. Phase two set the stage for the Calibra Elation era, right? This was
great.
Like great. Looking at governance for a top down, or looking at sort of a very technical bottoms up look. And this is where, they had a very opinionated structure. And that was kind of phase two. And then phase three, so I can let Neil jump in here and talk about the sort of tactical realities. Phase three is, I think, where we are now. We're starting to look beyond sort of data and starting to look at knowledge, right? So we're starting to flip that paradigm a little bit and focus more on results than deployed software. So
interesting. Yeah.
In my case, I feel very strongly about the idea of, a lot of people may think it's a buzzword, but this concept of data mesh, right? The socio-technical part of where we are in this evolution, where people, process, and technology all have to come together as sort of equal constituents in this solution. And so now we're looking at a graph problem, right? It's what do we have? How do they relate? And who's working on it? And what are the governance and process pieces that help them all come together? So that's kind of the evolution as I think about it. Neil, does that kind of jive with your view of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a good, three-phase, steps as to where we are. And I think you throw an interesting word, knowledge, right? We've got, and what I see in a lot of my organizations that I work with is the knowledge is in the heads of various resources, and if it's not captured, what happens when they leave? Right, it walks out the door. I've seen it at some of my current clients where a senior data engineer has done all this work, we didn't document any of it, and he left. So what's happened, right? I've got to go and figure it out. So how
That's
do I
another
capture-
up the creek thing, Neil. Come on.
it can be, yes. But how do I capture that knowledge? And then how do I have conversations that are captured and recorded over time? And the only way to do that really is within a metadata environment. The other aspect I've seen is we look at, certainly in the modern world, right? I look at data engineering, right? CI/CD, right? We want to automate everything. I want to automate my pipelines, my deployments. Yeah, we have this blind spot where we seem comfortable with manually maintaining documentation. It's just, and we don't really realize until it's too late in the game, particularly, good examples when people leave, that if we'd automated the capture of this over time, it makes it easier for us to maintain and enhance and improve our environment going forward.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that
remove
feels
the need for these data battles or whatever Patrick called them.
Yeah, feels to me a lot closer to I got a flat tire and I need a jack and a spare right now, right? When I have knowledge walking out the door, I mean that's seriously not good, right? So if the idea of this whole catalog concept is to sort of tame that problem, resolve that chaos in some way, then I think we're onto something here. So you guys both you skip through a little bit quickly for me. I want to go back and revisit this concept that says there's a phase one. So, some number of years ago, 20, 30, 40, in the beginning, there was a concept of Informatica, IBM that said, you know what, we got to put some technology to bear. We've got to get this stuff deployed. And there was a lot of good in that, I suspect. And there were some gaps of things that it didn't do, such that we brought this second wave. So the Calibra Elation and probably other vendors as well said, you know what, there's an uptick there. There's a vacuum and stuff that still needs to be resolved. We're going to go resolve it, right? So good for them. They basically did. And this is a little bit of a obviously a generalization, right? So I don't want to speak for these vendors. They all have a pitch in terms of what their value prop is and their benefits and all the rest. But if you were to just generally talk about the idea that says there was a phase one that motivated a phase two, and now this idea that the kind of solutions that are there in terms of Calibra and Elation, they left their own vacuum, like all technologies do. And so this is where the likes of Data.World and other providers are now, coming into the fold, right? And I think you mentioned, tops down, bottoms up. There's some catchphrases like that. But can you just try it again to say, okay, what was it about the phase one vendors that motivated the Calibras and Elations to come to market? And what is it about their solution as time has gone on that now motivates the opportunity for the likes of a Data.World kind of a paradigm?
Yeah, and I think, so I'm being a little unfair by naming names for each of these phases, because obviously, IBM and Informatica have evolved from there. And so have Calibra and Elation. And so to be fair to them, they've all evolved and gone for it. But anytime you evolve, you come along with some baggage, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, the technical debt problem, sure.
But to describe sort of the sort of differentiator between some of these phases, as I sort of think about them, I think it goes to the sophistication of the industry and the ecosystem, right? So from phase one, it was really, to be overly simplistic, it's lists of things, right? Now, all of a sudden, we have other pieces of the data ecosystem that have evolved. Now, suddenly, we're starting to think more about, governance, the regulatory compliance world. These types of things need to be layered on top of your lists of things and who's doing things with them. Or maybe there is technical workflows, just like code development move forward with the idea of tickets and resolving those tickets.
Yeah.
Right? Same kind of thing. You want sort of the workflow aspects of data to more closely resemble something that your team can break down into bite-sized chunks and move forward. So that's kind of some of the main differentiators between phase one and phase two, was an evolution of how we think about work in the data space.
Right. Neil, you concur with that point of view?
I concur, yeah, getting a handle on lineage as my data pipelines grow, understanding impact analysis, so that when I make a change on this particular area, or I'm upgrading my source system, what impacts are downstream for my data warehouse environment at that point in time. And then we introduce data science and self-service. So how do we start capturing that set of data? Fitness for purpose being probably another really interesting area. I mean, historically, my data warehouse was clean and pristine and everything was highly structured. It took forever
Yeah,
to get in
I
there.
ran my reports and called it good. Yeah.
Yeah, and it took me 6 months to get my data in there. But now I've got data that's in there that's not necessarily, maybe it's dirty, right? I can't use it. My CEO can't use it for financial reporting, but my marketing people can use it for trend analysis, right? So what's the fitness for purpose? It's directionally accurate. It just can't be used for financial reporting. So how do we start to capture that sort of information?
Yeah,
and,
very good.
Neil, you perfectly touch on some of the things between sort of phase 2 and phase 3 now, where we are, right? So I think there's, again, going back to that, Precambrian explosion, as I like to say, of data tools, we're really accelerating the sophistication of the market we're in, right? Looking at things like lineage, looking like data quality, data observability, data privacy, data masking. Like there's all sorts of things that bring in sophistication. They were upping our level of sophistication in the industry, and that's why the tools have to sort of change the way they think about it at a very basic level, and that's why it's hard to evolve between stages.
Yeah.
Versus people that are sort of purpose built.
Every company goes through this. You have an initial, you're a change agent in the market, right? You're coming with something with a clean piece of paper, a clean whiteboard. And, over the course of time, 10, 12, 15 years later, you are by definition pulling from that same paradigm that you started, right? So somebody else comes in with a fresh piece of paper 10 years later, it's easier for them to address the need. It's one of the challenges, I think, personally, of sustained growth of a company over multiple decades, right? It's not a trivial thing in the software industry, that's for sure.
I think the other interesting thing that kind of is in the background is the growth in usage of open source technologies, which allow you to do stuff but don't necessarily do things like capture metadata and stuff, because it's the open source, right? It's not the sexy stuff. So how do I make sure I capture that metadata, that tool, whatever that tool's doing?
Okay.
Now you've hit a space that's near and dear to my heart, Neil. My background is in open source, so I love hearing people, extol the virtues of open source, and even more than open source, but just a level of transparency, right? And being able to bring that to your ecosystem in general, whether it's within or without. We're seeing that evolve into other places. You see this with the open lineage movement that the Marquez people started. It's not open source, but it's much closer to open metadata. And how do we do that? What does that look like? And I love it that those sorts of ideals are starting to trickle into the different corners of the data ecosystem.
So Patrick, if you were to take a shot at getting in the heads of your founders, the day they decided to go for it, on the one hand, there's Coke and Pepsi in the market, and so yeah, we should be RC Cola. That's what the world needs. Another sugared Coke product, right? I don't think it was that. I think it's much more related to this phase concept. But what was in the heads of your founders? Like, why did you guys do this?
I mean, I can tell you exactly where it came from. So Brian, our CTO, used to be at HomeAway, which was an acquisition business, right? And they were fighting against Airbnb, which is that sort of nimble, agile startup type of approach to things.
Right.
And it gave them a very unique perspective in that they had, 26 or 28 different acquisitions over the course of a few years. And then they had to do that data integration. So now they had sort of exacerbated a single org's data problems into 26 to 30 different orgs worth of data problems. And they tried to solve it all at once. And digesting that level of data problems, Brian started thinking there's got to be a better mousetrap, right? There's got to be a better way for us to do this. Data integration, data linkability, data relatability, and then just data pipelining and workflows. So this is where sort of the idea for using the knowledge graph approach came from. This is where he was like, hey, there's a better way for us to understand the field of what do we have, who's using it, where's it coming from, and how do they relate? The operationalizing the relationships between your data sources often can be even more impactful than the individual data sources themselves.
Yeah.
And so that kind of spun into what became data.world. So,
So very experiential, right? This wasn't theoretical, right? You came at it from the point of view of a real life experience.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
and
It
it's
was
a little bit of
scratch
this
and itch engineering.
it's a little bit of this complexity thing, and where we were flirting with this, where's the tipping point concept. Clearly they were on the other side of the tipping point. Yeah. So Neil, if I have a little neighborhood coffee shop, one store, I probably don't need a data catalog. I'm going to just assert that, right? But if I'm Starbucks with zillions of stores around the world, I probably do need a data catalog without any hesitation. Any concept where the continuum really lies in terms of where it becomes obvious? So I'm sort of pushing on you again about this tipping point concept. How do I know when I need one, right? So when I get to 2 stores, do I need one? When I have 50 in an eastern region and a western region, it's probably not an easy answer. I'm not looking for a magic bullet, but there's some clues I have, right? That this is becoming over my head, and I better get one of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, probably a couple angles that may factor into that. If I've got multiple database environments across multiple different ecosystems, then I'm going to want a data catalog for that. If I'm getting into data science and self-service analytics, where I'm starting to broaden the end users of that data, then I'll certainly want to look at a data catalog tool. And the other one, particularly common today, right, is we go to a federated model where I've got people building data pipelines or building analytics, but they're scattered across the organization. So how do I capture the data from all of those people in a centralized way so that Patrick has got somewhere to go to find out, has someone built this before? And if they have, who do I go and talk to? Right? Oh, Mark built it. I can go talk to him if I've got questions. Those are probably
how about the M&A angle, right? So if I'm an organization that has grown through acquisition, and I've, there's five companies that are now in my portfolio that weren't there 3 years ago, is that a clue? Is that a factor?
Almost certainly, right? Because they're most likely going to have their own sets of environments that I'll need to stitch together. That would be the same as a large, large organization with multiple business units. They're probably going to be self-sufficient. But how do I capture the data across all of them?
Okay. All right, great. So I'm marginally technical, as Neil knows, right? I can be flirtatious with some of the vocabulary when pressed, but not somebody that would qualify as a chief data officer kind of role. So I am curious, if we think about people that are leading companies today, and we make the distinction between somebody technical, like you, Neil, a CTO or a chief data officer or something like that. I mean, the question is, what's the pitch to them about why we need a data catalog? And is that the same pitch that you would give me as a CEO? Would you say, oh, Mark, we need one of these data catalog things because, do I give a hoot about this? Or do I just say, you know what, that's the CDO, just take it up with them. I don't care about this stuff. How do we frame the discussion between the technical leaders and the business leaders?
Yeah, I think, and Patrick can chime in with his thoughts too. I think from the CEO perspective, it's important because you need to be able to trust the data. I need to know what's coming from, and can I trust it in what use cases, right? What's its fitness and purpose? I care about that as a CEO. A CDO, I'm obviously going to care about that as well, but I'm also going to care about making sure that my teams or the people within my groups that are actually building and using these environments have captured all the knowledge, right? I don't have this tribal knowledge that walks out the door when my senior architect leaves, or my senior data engineer leaves, right? I need to be able to ensure my environment can continue to evolve at a pretty rapid clip based on the business needs.
It's almost like it's a business argument, even if you're talking to technical leadership, right? I'm not hearing you say you need one of these left-handed special screw things. It's not a technical argument like the old Hadoop argument was.
Yeah.
It's a very much anymore, a business pitch.
20 years ago, analytics was nice to have, right? So it takes 6 months to get it in. If the data warehouse is down for a week, who cares? I mean, that was back when I started doing that in the 90s. No one cared, but we're running our businesses now based on these environments. So the data's got to be trusted. I need to ensure that thing's robust and stable. I can't have downtime. So how do I ensure the environment's stable? I know that change and impact analysis is not going to break something critical. Where's my data? How do I trust it? All of those things are essential to the lifeblood of these analytic environments now.
Yeah, and Mark, I think you make a perfect point that a lot of these are business arguments, and that's why a CEO is going to care. Because I think it's an easy sell when you get really down to it, to a chief data officer or even a chief analytics officer or a CIO or people that are looking to solve real problems. They understand the sort of inner workings of the process challenge that they have to work with. But I think it's just as easy to sell to a CEO if you understand sort of the macro trends that you're dealing with. And realistically, your data environment can no longer afford to be a private club of the technical elite within your organization, right? You have to be able to include these subject matter experts who may not be able to write or even spell SQL, right? Like you have to be able to have the people in there that will contextualize your data in a way that often your technical folks can't, because they're not living the data, they're processing it, right? And so I think breaking down silos, enriching the context of your data, allowing you to ask more sophisticated questions of your data so that you can have a better understanding of the market. Any good CEO worth their salt is going to understand the value of that because they're probably looking at those same sort of macro dynamics in the market. If they're trying to raise money, if they're trying to, understand what the IPO situation is going to look like for their business, they're tackling the same problems in a different way. And so that same sort of linguistic approach is going to work perfectly on your CEO because they understand.
All right. Well, I accept that, but let me push back a bit and say I'm the cynical CEO. Imagine that for a day, and I go, okay, I hear you, Patrick, but come on, man. I've invested in all this technology. You told me to move my on-prem to Snowflake. I did that. You told me to get better ETL tools. I did that. You told me to get data lineage. I did that. And now you're telling me we're still not done? Like what? Why? Like what is it about this thing that I didn't already solve?
Well, I mean, I would push back and try to understand the individual environment, right? You say you've moved to Snowflake. Well, did you move your main database to Snowflake and you still have, 15 other data sources, whether you have
Yes, I do. I probably do.
And that's where you look even further beyond sort of the core catalog use case. And this is where that sort of knowledge graph approach, looking at, okay, how do we relate the sources of data that you have? But more than that, how do you have a front door, that front office for your data, where as you migrate more and more of your sort of legacy or traditional enterprise solutions over to, the cloud solutions or the data warehouses or whatever it is, the end user then doesn't have to keep up with those migrations. They have a single source where they can go and they see, this is where I discover my data. And the data engineers in the background can be moving things and migrating things and modernizing, but you have a front door, and that's the same.
I think that's the key answer to the cynical question, right? This idea that I've got all these technologies I've invested in with data engineers, architects, and all that, but Neil sees this all the time when we go into clients. There's always this fracture, this schism between the techies on one side of the tennis net and those that are data consumers, data analysts, actuaries, if they're in the insurance business, whatever, trying to actually do their thing. And this is where I think the data scientists live. They tend to be business facing. So it feels to me like one of the key value props of the data catalog is not just keeping track of your data in sort of in the abstract sense, but to literally blow away these sort of barriers between tech people and business people. We're all in this together, right? So the technology that comes from people like you now is in a place where mere mortals on the business side can interact with it. They can get great value from it. And we don't have this put a ticket in to IT nonsense like we had 5 years ago. Is that fair? Right? We're starting to get all the players on the field together.
No, absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to think about it, especially even extending where you were ending up there, which is into self-service analytics. The more that you can enable people to get what they need on their own without having to wait. I'll go back to my favorite book, Winning with Data. One of them was one of the other problems they described was a data breadline, right? Because often the first step.
What did you say? Data breadline?
Data breadline, right? Just
okay.
like the Great Depression, right? The breadlines, like it's the idea that as an organization, often some of the first steps they take into data modernization is they're like, well, we're going to make a crack squad of data experts and they're going to service the broader constituency. And all of a sudden, everybody gets really excited. And now that crack squad is underwater and they can't keep up with the inbound requests. So the more that you can enable people to self-service, the better and the faster you're going to get to that modern data, nirvana, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Patrick. I mean, we see that in quite a lot of the customers that we go into. They've got queued up their requests and the data team's got 2 years of backlog of requests, and they'll never get there.
Let's take the conversation to kind of finish this out into the future. And predicting the future is always a dangerous game. It's you're probably not going to be right, but let's give it a shot. I think we're pretty clear about the phases of the way the technology has evolved through present day. Patrick, where does this go? Like, where does the next startup come from? What do they see as an opportunity that's 5-10 years down the road? Any crystal ball on that?
It's so hard given the pace of innovation. I mean, our firm alone is doing 1,000 software releases a year, or more. I shudder to think what the person who comes up without any sort of customers or maintenance requirements or anything is going to be able to do in terms of innovation, right? The pace of innovation is just astounding. But I will say, in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, I'm actually thinking about consolidation, right? I think that's the period that we're in right now. I think we're going to see some winners and losers. I think we're going to see some acquisitions. And then for those that remain, I think we're going to see a lot better ecosystem and a better integration story between the players that are remaining, right? You're going to see the lineage players and the data quality players and the data privacy detection players, and all of these folks they're going to have to play nice in some way, shape, or form.
That's a great point, because I again, back to this I'm a CEO thing. We've got to figure out a way to integrate all these things. They can't just be point products, right? So to think about data lineage as entirely distinct and separate from data cataloging that's hard to get your head around. They're really not that distinct. They're different, but they're related, right? So if what you're forecasting is over the next 3 to 5 years that a lot of these technologies will come together in some way, whether it's through one buying another or consolidation, because some will survive and some won't potentially. I mean, who knows? But it sounds to me like there's sort of a dampening of this this effect where I've got 14 different things I got to buy to solve my problem, right? That's hard, right? As a buyer. So that's encouraging, right? And would you say you guys are now I'm asking a question about data.world. Are you guys in a place where you see that coming and you're doing your best to integrate to other third parties that are doing things like lineage and stuff like that, so I as the customer don't have to deal with it?
I mean, absolutely. But that's something that we actually started with as a premise from the very beginning, which was taking a very integration-centric view of the world. Often you see these data solutions and they'll come and they'll say, hey, here's our product, here's our secret sauce, it's really exciting. And then the very next thing they do is they build some sort of data visualization engine. But there are people, Power BI, Tableau, Looker, Click, there are people out there that are doing that very, very well. There's no reason to reinvent that wheel.
Yeah.
So, taking that integration-centric view of the world frees you to then think about the hard problems that are still left unsolved. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, between the problems that are left unsolved that we're going to see things crop up to solve, and then looking at sort of the better integration stories and evolving the ones that we already have, right? I think data quality is a perfect example of this. We have this kind of data quality, data observability, is it SOTA? Is it DQ Labs? Is it Monte Carlo? Like, who's going to be the winner there? I don't know. But I think data quality and data observability are poised to take an evolutionary step forward, right? The thing that we think about when I say data quality, you probably think about, is my data clean? Is my data complete? and that's, you know, I don't want to say it's unnecessary. It's absolutely necessary, but it's inherently boring. Like,
Well,
there's
yeah, well,
better questions
it's
to be
boring
solved.
until you get it wrong. I mean, I think of
Well,
it as
exactly. Yeah.
data quality. Is it right? I mean, I just think of it as
Right.
it right, and that's a cheeky way of saying it. What does that mean? Is it right? But that's a tough challenge. I mean, that's a whole nother webinar discussion about what is data quality and how do we deal with it. Because I
Yeah.
know
Well,
customers
and
that
there's
I
that's going to happen, you know, 50 times in the next couple of years, where
Yeah.
data quality is just one example. Data lineage might be the next one. Open lineage may be the future. Like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, all of these things are going to continue to evolve. So I think the way that you have to think about the future is you have to think about it in terms of centers of gravity. And a great example here is Snowflake. They are doing a wonderful job. You know, your data warehouse is becoming a platform that you build on top of. Right. So not only do I have to make sure I capture all the things that are outside of that data platform with my catalog, now I have to be able to look introspective into my data warehouse and say, okay, what can I do around governance that's now deeper because I have this warehouse that has deeper level capabilities? And so you're going to see all of these point solution things that we're talking about, lineage, observability, quality, whatever, are going to be able to look deeper into the data sources, and the people that sort of build those centers of gravity, I think, are going to have a really big sway on what the future looks like.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I think
great.
I think that's a really interesting point, right? And I think where I see the future going is, and Gartner and Mark Byron and co, have this term active metadata, right? I've got all this metadata describing my environment, then I can be more proactive and automate aspects of my environment based on what we're capturing, right? I mean, simple examples. I'm building out data models in my data warehouse environment. If those aren't being used, we can age those out and reduce the pipeline processing, which reduces the cost of my organization, and understanding various other things around data quality, right? Rather than having Mark go and figure out what's wrong with my data, have it be proactive, have it automate, and have it notify. Again, getting into more automation. We see it everywhere else in our ecosystem, right? With code tools and deployment. I think that's the next step from a metadata perspective. And now we've captured it. And I think from a data.world, from a tech perspective, having a knowledge graph underneath that describes my metadata is going to be leaps and bounds ahead and provide me a good set of technologies to enable that.
Yeah, all right, cool. So Patrick, let me close by putting you on the spot a little bit. And you're certainly not going to be in a position to speak for other vendors. So when the question is, what does this stuff cost, right? I don't expect you to give me a quote for what does Informatica cost? That's not appropriate, or I'm not even sure you could do that. But certainly representing your own firm, I think people are always interested once they become intrigued with, okay, maybe I do need one of these data catalog thingies. What's the investment I got to make? I mean, can I get in for under $100,000 with you guys? And again, I don't want to. But this isn't like a quote or every situation different. I get that, but bigger than a bread box kind of thing. What does this stuff cost if we go to data.world?
I'm going to start with the non-answer, and then I'll come back and get more specific. But the non-answer
Well,
is it is dependent,
vendor,
right?
Yeah.
Like the company executive in me wants to say, like, call us, right? And we all hate that. Like, you go to your company's pricing page and this is a new tool that I want to buy, and it says call us. I just want a ballpark. Tell me the napkin sketch. And I think ultimately it depends on your scale, and it's going to be very different for very different people. But I think the people solving the problem in the right way are going to start with a small team, a focused use case, and they're going to go and they're going to get that right. And whether that's 50, 60, 80K, whatever, I think that's probably a realistic
But that's
estimate.
the order of magnitude. I mean, that's really all I'm asking for. This stuff's not $5, but it's not $1 million, right?
Exactly. And I think, like, if you start it the right way, you're in for under 100K, right? And get it right, and then scale more use cases, more people, and then sure, like, people that are giants in their industry that are looking at tens of thousands of seats, and they're looking at then you're going to spend $1 million.
Well, yeah, if you're
whatever
Procter and Gamble and you're going to put every piece of data in the entire company on all divisions, I can see it's going to be a bit north of 80K. But no, you've answered my question. I appreciate that, because again, it's a put you on the spot kind of thing. But Neil, as you see the problem set that's out there, I mean, is that palatable? Is that worthwhile? Would somebody in the market go 80K? I would never pay that. Or do you see this as is the ROI pretty obvious?
Well, I think it depends on your lens, right? I think the ROI, from my perspective, the ROI is pretty obvious because you've got to factor in the soft costs of the people who maintain metadata. So 80K for a tool that's going to do this for me is going to be significantly cheaper than the cost I'm spending on expensive FTEs who maintain this manually. And
So it's software versus people is kind of the argument.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Mark,
Yeah.
how many times have you walked into an organization and seen million or billion-dollar businesses decisions being made on an old Excel spreadsheet? Like,
Yeah, more than I can count, buddy.
It just takes one time to get a couple of cells wrong on one of those Excel spreadsheets, and all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt, and you could have paid that 80K several times over, right?
Yeah, very good. Well, that's fabulous. And again, I sorry for putting on the spot, but I always, I always hate to talk about technology and get everybody warmed up to the idea that maybe I need one of those things without giving some kind of notion of, what does this stuff cost? Come on. So thank you for lowering your guard a bit there. I think we promised everybody a 45-minute discussion, and we're just about there. My iPhone says 10:48 Pacific time. Chris, is there any questions that have come in that we haven't already discussed? We've been all over the place here, but has anybody brought anything up that you would want to highlight we should cover before we adjourn?
No, you've done a great job. I think you've got it all covered.
Okay, great. Well, let me just conclude then with a quick infomercial. If you want anything further from our firm, cleandatainc.com, cleandatainc.com is the place to go. All kinds of click buttons there to get more information or to set up a conversation. Same with you guys, data.world. Do I have this right? Your company name is your website? Is that
it? It is. Yep, it is our TLD. You just type in data.world and you're going to the right place.
I'll tell you what, your marketing department, geniuses. Well done. So if you need anything further from data.world, then go there, and I'm sure there's lots of information. So let me just conclude then by thanking you, Patrick, you, Neil. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've learned some things. I hope you out there that have attended have as well. This is all recorded. We will post it in a number of places on our mutual websites for sure. I suspect we'll pop it up on our LinkedIn sites as well, so you can see it there. If you have friends, family, maybe you want your mother to check this thing out, you'll have an opportunity to do that by checking out the recording. So thank you, everybody. Wish you all a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.